Cool.
Welcome, everyone, to our next episode of Coffee with Sales Engineers. I am so excited to have Mr. Brian Cotter on the show. And I'm so excited that I want to change the title of the show because, yes, you've been a sales engineer, but Brian, I think you are one of the most known SE leaders in our community. You've spoken at events, you've done webinars, you've done a lot of thought leadership, and you've got the highest sales engineering title, SVP of Sales Engineering. Brian, so exciting to have you on this podcast. Thank you for joining. Why don't you give a quick introduction to our listeners? And for people that can see me on video, I'm actually wearing a suit, which I usually don't. And after Brian's introduction, I'll tell you why I'm so dressed up. So, Brian, tell us about yourself.
Sachin, thank you very much. That's the first time everyone's introduced me like that. I view myself just as a sales engineer that's a little bit older, a little bit more miles on the tires. And one of the things, other than 2 years out of college, I've done this role. And it's been something that I've always said, I get to travel and play with cool toys and solve problems every day. It's a chess match for me. And the evolution of this role has gone from being bribed out of a back room to actually being key presenters in executive level meetings at big companies to their C-suite. So it's exciting to see the evolution. And I think that we are just seeing the impact of what these roles can have. And I think that we're going to see a bit of a renaissance as AI takes more of a hold. So I'm really excited for this conversation, but more importantly, I'm excited in just elevating pre-sales and what that means to companies' go-to-market strategies in the future.
And I know you have an amazing journey of how you fell into the sales engineering profession. Do you want to give a quick memory lane journey into that? And then we'll dive into our new format.
When I first started, came out of school, two different stories come up. I worked for a company called Dictaphone, and I was a sales rep, and I hated the shaking hands and kissing babies and demand generation, and I could not stand negotiating. It just wasn't my personality. But I loved the middle of the deal, middle of qualification to start negotiation. So back in the Dictaphone late days, they were actually starting to do computer telephony, transcription and dictation over the telephone lines, over the internet. And I just got more interested in the tech than I did in the sales process, but I liked the competitive part. And then when I went to Salesforce in 2006, one of the things, the evolution of the cloud and the evolution of technology, I was working with my boss at the time in San Francisco, and my first day that I had, my sister was involved in a pretty crazy car accident that I had to go home. And like that night, and I only knew one person in San Francisco, which was my boss, who was hired 6 weeks before I was. Wow. And she was an unbelievable person and navigated this first couple of months with me at Salesforce. And to this day, we're still good friends and talk here and there when we see each other. But we were having a bunch of drinks, and she just said, if I knew then what I know now, I don't necessarily know if I would have looked at your profile, let alone hired you. And it was that profile of an SE that was technical. And the first thing I thought of, and I don't necessarily know if it was my inner monologue or I said it out loud, but I basically was like, I'm going to be your best effing mistake you've ever made. And to that day, it's always been about the power of the story. You can learn technical chops. You can learn soft skills. You can learn technical, elements depending on what company you're working for. But if you can't connect with people and align them to their story that shows them their future, it's a lot harder. And so that's the two different things. One, I found out I love technology. I'm naturally curious, but it's also the ability to show someone their future, whether it's a promotion, a raise, hitting a target, or advancing their own personal growth. And there's more to it than just the demo. And I don't like the word demo at all.
Love that. Such a powerful story. And I love your emphasis on the storytelling. And that's what this podcast is all about. It's just about bringing stories of how people fall into this role, why they stay in this role. And I love what you said right at the beginning of this podcast, that most people know this is still a maturing profession. And yes, there's a lot more awareness about our profession, but there's so much more potential for where this sales engineering, pre-sales, solution consulting is going to go over the next 10 years. All right, let's jump into this fun part now. Very different format than what I've done before. And I love to do this with you, Brian, because you and I have talked over many conversations around the challenges that SE leaders face. And what I wanted to do is role play as I am your sales leader. And I'm going to bring up 3 toughest objections that I've experienced in my career as an SE leader. I've heard from many other SE leaders that they struggle with when these three objections come up. And I just want to see your magic. I want to see how you address those objections, what kind of ideas and recommendations you come up with. And I'm hoping that through our role play, many people can learn, take some tidbits and insights that they can leverage in their own role. All right. So here I am, suited and booted as a sales leader should be. And you and I are having this discussion. You're on my team. You report to me, and you've been talking about how the SE bandwidth on the SE team is struggling. And we're having this discussion and talking about growing the SE team. And typical answer is, Brian, why do we need more SEs? They're expensive resource, man. Can we do more with less? Can we just keep the SE team? Let's hire more salespeople. That's what we need, Brian.
Sachin, we've had this conversation over the last couple of quarters, and every quarter we look at what we're doing and how we're doing it. And it's an interesting perspective. One of the things I'd like to maybe return the serve to you is if you could please elaborate on your thinking. Like, what are you looking at that is actually driving towards more AEs and less SEs, or maybe slowing the SE hiring down to afford more AEs?
My sales leaders keep telling me that we need more pipeline coverage. We need to bring in more reps. If we can just get in front of more opportunities, Brian, we can exceed our targets. So let's bring on some more reps and assign them quotas and give them territories and let the magic happen.
I appreciate that, Sachin. And you, in the things that we've talked about, like looking at a lot of the industry trends, a lot of the research that I look at from companies like Consensus or Vivint, which are tools that we use within the pre-sales team to help us get better visibility, the ratios are actually going the other way. We're actually seeing a lot more in the buyer's journey, that the buyers are coming to us later. They're actually coming to us with a stronger point of view, and they're actually looking to solve problems. So that when I look at this, first of all, what we need is the ability for us to actually do better discovery to root cause, which allows us to really understand the problem, then propose a solution, versus discovery to symptom, which really just allows us to position a SKU or solve a small problem. And the reason why I'm bringing up the industry trends is one of the things we're learning about the buyer enablement technology, where basically if you think about how do you sell when you're not with your buyer? How do you share a point of view when you don't even know who they are? How do you influence them? And an example that we talked about last week is that we looked at our pipeline coverage in Q3, and we dropped 60% in canceled opportunities by the end of Q3. And we talked about where did deals go to die and why. And really, if you take a look at it, if we're looking to solve the pipeline problem, I do believe that the stories that we tell can actually be influencing the buyers ahead, above the funnel. So when we actually get into the funnel, we can actually have a more educated buyer and a qualified deal. And the reason why I bring that buyer enablement technology, it allows us to create a buyer's journey that we can define based upon our company. And there's a lot of research that I can send you on the front. The second part is generative AI. Generative AI has made our buyers a lot smarter. And if you look at the statistics, 83% of the time, the buyers are alone. They're 80% down the buying path before they reach out. And 85% of the time, they'll kick you out or not invite you to the second meeting unless you hit the mark. So although I do appreciate the fact that AEs close deals, I would probably recommend that we look at our own data and look at what I call the anatomy of a deal with some of the tools that we have in place right now to understand the insights where we get risk in deals, understanding the resources that we use when we're using a platform architect, when we're using a value person, when we're bringing a product specialist, and how the AEs are partnering, but more importantly, when they are partnering with them through the sales cycle. Because I do believe if we understand that data, we can actually define a roadmap for our future. And at least we're going to make an educated decision on where we need to invest in more quota carrying reps or more SEs that can help support the deal. So I have a strong opinion. I look at it from maybe the pre-sales point of view, as you well know, but I think what we can do, the first thing before we start making any decisions would be, let's look at our own data so we can see the risk in deals and how we sell up, over, around, or through it. Understanding the resources so we can replicate the anatomy of a deal in a successful way. And then we can also look at that data in aggregate and saying, what is the outcome? Are we actually impacting more deals? Are we driving better velocity? Or are we actually looking at maybe getting better discounting margins? So although I see where you're coming from, I think this warrants maybe a step back just
Yeah.
to look at the reality of the world we're facing and how we're doing. But we also have some tools in place right now that we can leverage to help drive that insight, because it's not just an AE motion. Every single customer and prospect facing employee is now a seller. I think that we have to expand past the AE metrics and really look at the go-to-market metrics as these roles are performing different functions across that buyer's customer's journey.
That's really interesting recommendation. And let's do that. Let's dig into the numbers. I am responsible for company's top line. If you believe that we can achieve and exceed our targets, having more SEs and having the right ratio between that AESE coverage and still maximize our territories, optimize our pipeline, let's dig into those numbers. I like that. Let's do that as next step.
Cool. All right. I'll set that up and I can forward you a few of the different articles and research that I'm doing. And let's just have an open conversation, because I think that we're in a pretty interesting time that our data and our performance will help guide us on what we need to do next.
Let's do it. Brian, you also mentioned tools. I think we obviously have invested in some tools, but I know in our meetings you continue to bring up new technologies that are coming out. These tools are expensive. We already have a lot of systems in place that we use for sales. Can we continue to use the sales technologies that we've already invested in and maybe tweak them a little bit for the SE use case?
I've been doing this for, as you well know, a long time, Sachin. I've seen things evolve from duct tape, super glue, and sticky notes as far as piecing things together. The one thing that I felt at my time at Salesforce before you and I joined is Salesforce helped you keep up with the speed of your ever-changing business, and it allowed administrators to modify the go-to-market motion in an application and operationalize it and scale it out to the organizations. Game-changing when you talk about multi-tenancy and cloud computing. However, the world we live in today, and this is where I talk about everyone's, oh my God, it's hard to sell, it's hard to do this, and CROs are getting fired. But why? And I'm not saying you're going to get fired, Sachin, but the pressure is on you. And I think that we need to rethink the way we've done things. And this is where I talk about when you look at go-to-market efficiency, the pandemic created nothing, but accelerated everything. And one of the things it accelerated was the buyers are in control of their own journey. They're also autonomous/independent, and they want it when they want it, and they want it digitally. So we need to reimagine the buyer's journey. And the reason why I keep on saying buyer is our job is to take a prospect who's a prospect once for you to become a customer. And they're only a customer because they're giving you money, but they are in essence a buyer in perpetuity, bouncing between the buying journey and the value journey, where pre-sales never ends unless we don't tell them the right story, and then they go tell their story to our competitor. Right. One big thing, how do we reimagine the buyer's journey when we're in the world we're in right now? The second part is, and I mentioned it before, generative AI has created Albert Einstein in every single buying situation, every single buyer we're selling to. They're smarter, they're more down the path, they've researched the daylights out of it, and we need to look at how we arm our sellers in a way that they come to a point of view with the buyer. And here's the interesting thing, they're only with them 17% of the time. 83% of the time, they're alone. If you have 5 vendors to start, you have 3.4% to actually get your point of view when you meet with them. How can we use technology to actually help influence our buyers before we even know them? Share our point of view, our passion, our why we do this. Because when they're coming to us, they tell us 85% of the time, they're not inviting you back to the second dance if you don't hit the mark where it's unique, relevant, and personalized. With that being said, I do believe we have to counteract the Albert Einstein buyer with a strong point of view that we come to the table and say, this is what we know about you, this is what we know about your industry, and this is where we can help you solve your problems to drive towards those outcomes. The third part towards those outcomes is Wall Street has basically said, grow at all costs is out, grow with profitability is in. And I don't care if you're a public company or a private company, the fact of the matter is companies are buying based upon the problems you solve, the outcomes that you can deliver, and the value you can actually render over time. Chief operating officers, chief business officers are basically saying, if you can't show me value over time, I'm not talking to you. And it's the hard dollar, soft dollar, but it has to be something that's more than just throw it over the fence and then we're gone. ROIs are real. We don't call them ROIs anymore. We may call them value realizations, but that is a big mindset. Much like we talked about last year, value sold, value delivered, value realized. We have to reimagine that buyer's journey because it's all about the buyer's experience. And ultimately, there's only 3 outcomes in every single interaction: decrease wallet share, running flat, or increase wallet share. And the reason why I'm focusing on the buyer's journey, because the buyer enablement total addressable market is expected to grow from like $70 billion today to 155, 160 billion based upon the Info Harbor research over the last couple of years. And I can send you that article. All it's saying is that companies are realizing the sellers need to guide the buyers along their journey. And this is the investment in technology. So you and I have talked about this. We're not here just to sell this SKU. We're here to help companies evolve and take the next step to their next generation of their own organization. And if we want to stay ahead, I believe that we need to look at technology. We need to rethink our buyer's journey from go-to-market efficiency. We need to rethink the way that we enable our teams, and we need to rethink the way that we can actually impact companies on their own go-to-market effectiveness. If we do that, then I think that we can achieve our target. So once again, going back to the first one about SE-AE ratios, there is a 3 or 4 use cases that I do believe that we can help today. And we're actually already using some of the stuff today. And I'd like to share you a little bit more of what that means. And just let's put it on the table and have a healthy, respectful conversation. And then we can figure out where we want to go, because we can't boil the ocean, but we do want to make sure solving particular problems, we can focus on these things.
No decision used to be our biggest competitor. Because of our strong sales engineering team that we have, we don't lose to competition based on features and capabilities. We most often lose to competition because the buyers are just not ready. And I think what you're describing is understanding and optimizing on that buyer journey can help those buyers make their decisions faster, so they don't just punt the decision to, we'll do this in the future.
Yeah, I think the ratio conversation is coming up more and more, and I think it's worth a conversation. And the one thing I will bring up is we're seeing a lot of industries using a lot of different approaches. And I know that we want to get into a little bit more of our motion and what our teams are doing here, but there's product-led growth, there's solution selling, there's value selling, there's buyer-led growth, there's sales-led growth. You name it, there's a methodology around it. At the bottom of every single deal, I look at in 4 ways. What is the problem that we're looking to solve, or the opportunity that company wants to go after? We need to know that. And that the other side of the spectrum, what is the outcome quantifiably or defined in some way that says we did X, we accomplished this? I believe the stories that we tell is the solution. That's where we get to be creative and present our product to address their problems or drive towards their opportunities and show them that the outcome that they can realize over time. And the last part of the story is, which has really evolved over the last 15 or 20 years, is really walking them through a path of how they can realize the value of what they bought. So there's 4 chapters in the way that I think about question 1 about the number of SEs to AEs, as well as leveraging technology. If we can't solve the problem and we can't walk them through where they can hit their targets and they see it, and it's actually a strategic partnership. And I'll go back to what I said earlier in the first question. Discovery to symptom creates a binary relationship. You either sell them or you don't. You implement or you don't. You renew or you don't. It's a transaction. Discovery to root cause creates a relationship, creates 17 different pathways to success. You're going to have problems, but if we understand the goal, we have many different roads to get there. If we understand the SKU or the symptom, we have one road. And I think that's fundamentally where I marry the SE-AE ratio as well as the technology tools. How do we get to where we can build strategic relationships?
One of the things earlier on, Brian, you mentioned that everybody in the company should be selling. I struggle with that because I feel like we've got a sales team, we've got our reps that should be focused on, they are quota-carrying reps, they should be focused on bringing deals, closing deals, beating the competition, exceeding targets. And SEs kind of support that, right? Shouldn't the SE function and focus be just on helping our sellers? Why are you thinking they need to go beyond the sales function, man?
Sachin, it's funny you mentioned this. It is a huge conversation that it's been debated a lot. And it's opposite of what I'm seeing and what I'm feeling and what I believe. And let me give you an example. I don't want to give a name, but a very successful PLG company went from zero to the enterprise selling motion and stalled out. They're like, what's going on? So when you look at SMB, commercial, mid-market, enterprise, strategic, global, it really is something that we need to look at it piecemeal, because generative AI is disrupting the BDR world. But how much of an impact is it going to have on commercial? This company took a step back, and mind you, they were a PLG, product-led growth company. It should sell itself. I think at certain moments it's brilliant, and it sets the stage for so many foundational elements of the experience that your buyers are going to go through. And there's some awesome stuff, but all of a sudden you hit the enterprise selling motion and this company stalled out. So they basically took a step back and they're like, what are our buyers want? And a lot of it was based in the PLG, but the other part was a relationship. So this company actually evaluated, and they came back and they said, we need less AEs with higher quotas surrounded with pre and post sales professionals. AEs work with SEs, platform architects, value teams, engagement managers, something I refer to as like the 5 best friends, which is what I've lived and breathed at BMC: the AE, the SE, the CSM, the engagement manager, and the value / platform architect, maybe 6 best friends. We went to war together. We've been selling SKUs and we've been working opportunities reactively. We now need to grow up. And when we grow up to account centric, we need to be proactive. We need to be strategic. We've invested in innovation. We've invested in acquisitions. We now need to evolve to an account centric sell. That is different than, AE creating the deal and negotiating the deal. We now have to think about middle of qualification to start a negotiation as a story that we need to figure out. And that's why one of the things that, if you look at what I said earlier about the pandemic created nothing and Albert Einstein has created, buyers are Albert Einsteins and being able to sell value, the buyers are driving the change. And I'll use one example here. Bob Beecham, who was the CEO of BMC, took them from a mainframe organization to a network operating center to a distributed environment to manage the infrastructure of any company. That was technology and a leader pushing technology. Mark Benioff basically said, client server is dead. The cloud is going to be able to evolve. And then Teens Out, Zora talked about the SKU to a subscription, a transaction to a relationship. Those were technology-led like innovations or changing. One of the things we're seeing in the pandemic accelerated it, which I said earlier, the buyers are driving. And this is the course of my career. BMC, Salesforce, Zora, Inside Sales, and Seismic. And the reason why I bring that, lower left at BMC, the seller owned the whole process. And it was all about the capabilities and what you can do. Maybe there's some value thrown in there, solution selling. But as I went to Salesforce, everyone's like cloud computing, subscriptions. Yeah, great. But Mark opened up a try before you buy. Buyers were getting smarter. Then I went to Zora because people didn't want to buy a subscription or a SKU. They wanted to buy a subscription, aka a relationship. And a relationship allows you to understand that buyer at another level, but it also creates a ton of data. And the reason why I left Zora to go to Inside Sales is that data allows you to say, what's the next best action for the buyer? What's the next best step we need to take? This is amazing, but my whole career has been about the next best story. What's the next best conversation? That's why I came to Seismic, which is a sales enablement platform, but it's very complementary to the buyer enablement and the buyer's journey. We prepare our sellers to be ready to interact with our buyers. And I think what we're experiencing now is the experiential economy. Like, we need to deliver great experiences every single time. So when we start talking about the SEs are trying to do too much, I'll leave you with this. I was bribed out of a back room with a bottle of booze to come and demo this particular part of the product. And what my aspiration and inspiration of the pre-sales occupation is, we become the strategic partner with the AEs to actually become the guide for the buyers along their journey and give them great experiences. And the one thing if we've learned from the B2C world, and I call the consumerization of the B2B enterprise selling motion, the B2C success of Amazon and Google and Microsoft and you name any other B2C tool that you use is now morphing into the B2B world. How are we going to be prepared? And it's all about the relationship. It's all about the story, and it's all about the value that can be realized over time. So once again, I don't necessarily think that we're doing too much. I think that we're evolving to the buyer's needs. And I think that we need to probably do some due diligence to understand our current modern day buyer's journey. Let's not over engineer it and over rotate, but let's get an understanding of the 5 best friends and what they go through every day. Then we can actually define that team to go out and really complement each other's skills.
That is so powerful, Brian. I wouldn't be surprised if listeners of these podcasts start pinging you to come on the sales leadership conversations with them to back them up. I really appreciate you sharing insights. I think we're done with the role play. Thank you for those 3 objections. I know I can relate to them. I know many listeners, either if you're a sales engineer or sales engineering leader, you either have or you will run into these and other objections. And I think a lot of data-driven approach, a lot of understanding who you're selling to, and also really having a perspective on how the buying journey is changing, because you're right, it is evolving. And to your point, the sales engineering function has to evolve along with that. Really appreciate you coming on board.
I believe those 3 questions are why companies aren't evolving. You need to actually push buyer enablement above the funnel, through the buyer's funnel, becoming a customer and growing into an advocate. You need to rethink all this stuff. But no one wants to think differently when they're not making their numbers. We need to change the playbook. And that's, to your point, it's the personality of being like pushing through the status quo, breaking down some walls. That approach with a sales leader, you will get them bought in. I want to show you the outcome, the impact, but I need to track this stuff in order to validate it.
Yeah.
I think going back to the number one thing is sales KPIs have been around for 50 years. How long has pre-sales KPIs been around for other than the ratios?
Yeah. They don't exist.
They exist,
but
they're not promoted and used. And I think
Right.
that's the biggest thing, is that personality and that conviction, not I think, or I suppose, I believe, I know, this is the research that supports it, and having a plan of attack. Every single thing I try to do is the same thing as I did as an individual contributor SE.
Yeah.
I need to figure out where to aim. I need to craft a narrative that people can easily follow. And I need to have 3 to 5 points that I leave with whoever I'm talking to so they can sell on my behalf when I'm gone. But if you're not careful, you can confuse someone like that. And having these mnemonic devices and having the data to support the things you do within these mnemonic devices is what the outcome is that can drive change. And if you're not willing to have a belief or a passion or take a stand or lean into data or lean into the power of what the role that you have, we're going to be demo people, and the questions that you asked are still going to happen. I appreciate the opportunity, appreciate the conversation.
Thanks so much, man.